What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here, and I want to talk to you about a Thor story that I read recently. Thor, Godstorm. This collects the three-issue Thor Godstorm miniseries written by Kurt Busiek and drawn by Stephen Rude, and it collects 2 issues of Tales of Asgard, written by Tom DeFalco and drawn by Mike Mignola. I don't remember what issues those 2 tales come from, but they're from the late 90s, I think. I read this miniseries, the Godstorm miniseries, several years ago, back when my old comic book shop used to be still around, and whenever I did not have a single issue or anything in my pull box, I would go through the back issue bins and I would look for miniseries that were complete, and then I could read them and enjoy them. If it was just 2 or 3 parts of a miniseries and you didn't have the whole thing, I wouldn't bother, but this was a 3-issue miniseries and they had all of it, and so I bought and read it, and surprisingly I enjoyed it. I say surprisingly because if you have been keeping up with my channel for a long time, you might know this. I'm not a huge Thor fan. I've come to enjoy and really appreciate the world of Thor. I really like Asgard, and I like a lot of the characters. I just don't like Thor himself. Thor has never really intrigued me. He's always kind of struck me as the dumb brute with a heart of gold. He's basically the jock who is willing to risk life and limb to save the world and save the many worlds, but he doesn't seem like an especially interesting character beyond that. And I hate to say that because I have some friends who are huge Thor fans, almost to a point where they made me despise the character even more than I already did, especially back when the first movie had yet to come out, and they were hyping that movie so much that I really came to despise Thor. But that is neither here nor there. Getting back to Godstorm, I think this book is really good. I remember enjoying it back when it was like early college, I think, when I read it the first time. I enjoyed it then, and then I picked this book up pretty cheap somewhere sometime back, and I decided I would wait and read it until after I'd read some of these books that came out before this, and turns out I liked it reading it a second time. I don't really have a whole lot to say other than I want to talk a little bit about it so that if you like what you hear in this video, maybe you'll seek this book out. So basically, this is set in 3 separate time periods, or 4, I guess, if you count the framing device. So you've got this framing device some point in Viking times, and you got these 2 boys. They are actually right here on the cover. These 2 boys meet up with this storyteller guy from their village, and he tells them a story from long, long ago where Thor kind of interacted with some of their ancestors and saved their village, and also their village kind of saved Thor's butt. And then you've got this storm spirit that is imprisoned, and then the old man, he tells them a story that is yet to come of Thor in the Silver Age of Marvel Comics when the Avengers are still a pretty new team. This is before Cap's Kooky Quartet was a thing, and once again Thor has to battle the Godstorm, which is this entity that was imprisoned many, many years ago. And then the next story is set even further in the future, which I imagine is in the present day from when this miniseries came out. And at this point, Thor is no longer Donald Blake. Now he is Jake Olsen, also working in the medical profession. And once again, he has to battle the Godstorm, and then Loki is present throughout all 3 of these time periods, and he's kind of manipulating things from behind the scenes, as he often does. At one point, even Loki kind of gives a very meta commentary on his own existence in Marvel Comics, something that's always kind of driven me insane about the character of Loki. He says to Thor, you know what, I did a bad thing, you're going to turn me in, Odin is going to, in his soft heart, not punish me, and then I will go on doing bad things and manipulating things and trying to kill you, and I won't ever be punished for it. And I agree, that happens all the time, and Thor, he says that he doesn't really understand that about Odin, but Odin does it anyway, and I have to say, I also don't understand it. And I understand Odin feels somewhat responsible for Loki because in some versions of the continuity, he killed Loki's parents, so he feels beholden to raise this boy and try and make him a better person than what his parents were, and obviously it doesn't work out that well. I get that, but there are some points where Loki does so many evil things that you have to think that Odin would just be better off killing the guy, and then the world would be a safer place, but whatever. I feel like Kurt Busiek and maybe even Stephen Rude also, I feel like they are kind of on the same wavelength as me in regards to Loki and his position in the Marvel Universe. There comes a point where I feel like enough is enough. Let's just kill this guy. Don't let him keep living in Asgard doing evil things, but whatever. I really like the way that these stories, they seemingly are 3 separate stories, but at the same time, they're all connected through this framing device and also through the same entity that keeps coming back in different ways at different points in Thor's life. A few years ago, it was right around the time when J. Michael Straczynski was leaving Thor, Matt Fraction wrote a miniseries called, I think, Reign of Thunder or Reign of Blood, and it was similar to this. You had different stories set at different points in Thor's life. The thing is, that miniseries, I think I might have it in single issues, I'm not sure, but that miniseries was more taking stories from actual Norse mythology and then interpreting them through the lens of Marvel Comics, whereas this is just a brand new story that Kurt Busiek and Stephen Rood came up with, but set in different time periods, and I really like that. That's about all I have to say, is that I think it's really great the way that he's able to take this story of this old man telling stories to these young boys and use that to connect what would ultimately be 3 separate stories, and also use the same villain to kind of connect them all and make them one single story. Also, you've got an event that happens in the first story set many years before the framing device, and in the last story set in the present day that kind of connects those 2 stories and makes them parallel with each other. So even though it feels like it's 3 separate stories because they're set at 3 different time periods, in a way it's also one single story that's just stretched out over several centuries. There's this one MacGuffin that connects the first and the third story. And also something that puzzled me while I was reading it, but ultimately I think I really enjoyed this aspect of the book, is that this is a 3-issue miniseries, and there's 3 separate stories that the old man is telling these 2 boys. So you would be thinking that the first issue is going to be set in the Viking times, the second issue is going to be set in the Silver Age, and the third issue will be set in the present day. That's not really how they do it. I mean, that's the order that the old man tells the stories, but like the Viking story, it doesn't end on the last page of issue 1. It ends, and then the old man goes into talking a little bit about the Silver Age in issue 1. And then he ends that issue, and then issue 2 picks up right where issue 1 left off in the middle of the Silver Age, and then that story kind of ends a little over halfway into the issue, and then we jump into the present day where we have Jake Olsen and his friend Benita or something like that, and then her brother Brom, and then issue 3 picks up where that leaves off. It's not a clean break, with issue 1 being the Viking story, issue 2 being the Silver Age, and issue 3 being set in the present day. It doesn't do that. And ultimately, I really like that. I was a little confused at first. I thought, well, you've got a 3-issue miniseries and you've got 3 stories being told in this framing device. You might as well just have it be a clean break with each story being 1 issue. That would be what would make the most sense to me. But at the same time, I think the way that they did it here worked very well. I would be remiss if I did not talk about Stephen Rood's artwork. I don't know if I've ever reviewed anything by Stephen Rood on this channel, but he is one of the most underrated artists of our day. He is a lot like if Jack Kirby had more time to hone his craft. And that sounds like a backhanded slap against Jack Kirby. I want you to know I am a huge Jack Kirby fan. I love just about everything that Jack Kirby did. Having said that, at almost every point in his career, Jack Kirby was putting out more content in a week than most creators put out in 3 months. Jack Kirby would be working on 4 books at once. He would be putting out roughly 1 issue in an entire week, penciling and inking sometimes. Sometimes he was inked by Vince Colletta, but sometimes he was doing the inks on his own books. So he would be doing like an entire issue in a week, and that is a lot of stuff. Any other creator out there today, if they had to put out as much stuff as Jack Kirby, they simply would not be able to do it, or their work would be really, really bad because they're having to put out so much stuff. Jack Kirby, his work was pretty awesome and pretty strong considering how much stuff he was putting out at one time. Stephen Rood, his work kind of reminds me of what Jack Kirby would be like if he had a lot of time to really focus on one series. Instead of working on 4 or 5 comics at once, what if he was just working on this one series and really putting his time and effort into it? I feel like his work would look a lot like what Stephen Rood is doing here. Stephen Rood's work is very smooth, it's very pleasing to look at, it's very Jack Kirby-ish, like I said. There's a little bit of Alex Toth in there, but I think it's like 80% Jack Kirby, 20% Alex Toth. But if all of that sounds really fascinating to you, sounds like a kind of art style that you would want to look at, I would first of all recommend that you seek out anything by Stephen Rood. He did a Batman vs. Superman, or a Batman-Superman team-up from the late 80s, early 90s, I think, and the artwork in that was absolutely gorgeous. I believe he is the most well-known for doing a creator-owned series called Nexus in maybe the 80s, which I have not read any Nexus nexus at all, I don't think. I might have read a team-up miniseries where he teamed up with Magnus Robot Fighter, which you probably did not expect me to bring up Magnus Robot Fighter in a Thor review, but anyway, I have not read any nexus, but that's something that I would kind of like to remedy, but every time I see the hardcovers out in the wild, they're always kind of expensive, so I never bother buying any of those. But anyway, Stephen Root's artwork is some of the best that I've ever seen. It's really incredible, and it's kind of a disservice to him, I feel like, that you don't see more people talking about how amazing his work is today. He doesn't do a lot of comic work today. He does a lot more pinup drawings. Like, if you look on his Facebook page, he does like a picture of Wonder Woman punching a tank or something like that, and then he'll sell it for a charity or something like that, or he'll just sell it, or he'll give it away or whatever. But he doesn't do a whole lot of comic work these days. It seems like his comic work is more limited than what it used to be, which is a shame, and that might actually explain why people don't talk about his work as much, but also I think people just don't talk about his work as much, and they really should. So overall, I really loved Thor Godstorm. This is a very fantastic book, even if you're not a Thor fan. If you like just good stories with great artwork, very well-told stories, I think you'll like Thor Godstorm. And if you don't like the character of Thor, have no fear, because he is not as featured here as you might think. He is in this book quite a bit. He is even, dare I say, the main character, but at the same time, if you really hate Thor, I don't think that you'll have any problems reading this book anyway. I don't care about Thor that much, and I love this book. Thor is not in this so much that he becomes a distraction from the really great story that's being told and the really great artwork that's being presented here. So overall, I don't think I have anything bad to say about Thor Godstorm. So I hope that you guys like this video. I really hope that I was able to convince you guys to check this book out and go buy it if you can find it somewhere. And in the meantime, I will see you guys in the future with another video. In the meantime, you guys have a great rest of the day, and I will catch you later. Have a good one.